Like ting.
It's the world's second worst camera. The world's second worst camera.
Go ahead.
That's what I said. It's the world's second worst camera.
Go ahead.
You know what the first worst camera is? One that doesn't work. But this one ain't far from one of those.
Well, it works. It's just...
It works. It's terrible. It has terrible audio.
You're being recorded now. Hello.
It's what?
You're being recorded now. Stop.
Oh, I would hope so.
Yapping.
What, don't you like being like yourself?
No.
That's all I ever hear with you.
That's called being a woman.
I see a car coming in here.
Oh, there is?
I hear something. So anyways, what I'm doing is I'm putting the main bearings in, and look, I'm using too much grease. That's assembly lube. Now, and I'm going to do the same thing with this one. You ready? Watch this. And it's going to blow up instantly. Instantly going to blow up. Oh, look at that. Look at this stupid jackass does. You better go find out. Let me see who that is. Somebody just pulled up in here. It is a person.
Okay.
A male person. Go yell. Okay. So I'm down to my last bushing here. And I'm going to try and do this so that you can see how I do this. And possibly put myself out there for some major criticism. Hold on a second. I'm going to get my tripod. I'm hoping you can see me. If not, that's okay. What I'm doing is I'm opening up these John Deere bearing kits. Alright, we're going to do some more clarifying because people don't understand what I talk about and what I say. These are standard bearings. The engine is actually extraordinarily clean. Inside, the crankshaft is quite good. I did notice when I took these main bearing blocks off, and just for your information, I have done numerous engines. Not only, I've done Fords, I've done John Deere's, I even dabbled in a Massey Ferguson one time, which I guess that was a Perkins, and yes, an International. So I'm not like super experienced with engines. I've only done, I don't know, ballpark figure 10 in my life, but they're pretty simple. This is a standard bearing. The oversized bearing or undersized bearing I didn't need. When I plasti gauged it, it came out that it was okay. So the way I'm doing this engine is the way 95% of my viewers would do an engine. And I know there's some engine builders out there that live in sterile environments that are watching this and cringing because of the dirt and the other shit and everything else. And maybe if I was doing this for a living, I may have a different approach as to how I would do this bearing, these bearings in this Inframe. But I'm just telling you right now, life is too short, dudes. You need to get yourselves a life. Just isn't. Some of this crap you guys are spewing just doesn't make any sense. And if you don't like the way I'm doing this, look, I just laid a bead of grease all across this entire bearing surface, okay? Yes, I did. So when I put this bearing on and I stick it on there and then spin it around the inside of the block, what do you think is going to happen with it? What do you think is going to happen? It's going to lubricate it. It's not dry. So, yep. So am I putting it together dry? Nah. I know there's one guy, he actually apologized for his stupidity, and, you know, which is all I can ask for. You know, it's like I'm rebuilding this engine off the back of a 1937 Chevy pickup truck, for Christ's sakes. And I'm using, you know, a quart of Valvoline. I'm not actually dipping it, but watch what I do. You ready for this? Holy crap. Look at this. I got it in my hand, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm rubbing it like this. It's like I'm lubing it up pretty good. So the instructions, and I did bother to read the instructions. The instructions say dip your bolts into a container filled with 30 weight motor oil, which I'm not using 30 weight, I'm using 5W30. Dip that into that motor oil and then take them out of the dip and let it dry, you know, drip off. So in my mind, why would I why would I do that, you know? It's like waste perfectly good oil, because once you start dipping bolts into motor oil, then you got to throw the clean motor oil away, or you just, you know, spill a little on your hands and coat it up, and off you go. So this is how I'm holding this together. I got my grease laid in on the new bearing. I've got the new bolts lubricated so that they can go in there. And you just have to watch, right there, there's an F point with an arrow pointing front. So you kind of got to be careful there. And then I have my top bearing, which actually rides inside the block. So let me get you off this stand and underneath there, and you can see how I do this. Make sure you're recording, in which you are. I don't know if you're going to be able to see the bottom side of this thing. You have to do this on your back because there's just not enough room here, and I don't think you're getting a good view of it. But how about there? You getting a view of that now? Right there? Okay, so this is probably the most difficult one. But I've got my oil all lubed up there. My journals are okay. They are clean. A little bit of oil on them left over from the tear down, or from the oil that was in there. And the hardest part about this is actually getting it to start. Alright? How the hell do you get them to start, right? See, when you got this greasy shit on there, alright, so I use a screwdriver. Yep, I do. And of course, I know there's some people out there that are probably cringing around, like, oh my god, you're scratching the back of that bearing, it's going to ruin it. No, it's not. No, it's not. Okay. And if you don't believe me, well, that's okay. I don't care. Okay, so I had comments that I should have had this block decked before I put it all back together again, because he saw that there was a lot of pitting. There is zero pitting on this engine block at all. There's nothing. There's no pitting at all. What you're seeing is what you're seeing here, these lines and stuff. There is a silicone sealant that is applied to the what do you call it? To the head gasket. Okay, and that silicone sealant leaves a line. You know, it's got some kind of acidic. I'd say it has an acidic property to it, because that's just the way they are. And where you see this shininess, there's no wear there. That is from the gasket itself. Normally what I would do to this head, and I probably am, that head up there and this deck of the block, normally what you do is you clean it up really good, take a little emery cloth, clean it up, which I'm not going to do. But normally what I would do is I would use a copper spray gasket on that. And what that stuff does, and I bought it, and I thought, you know, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't use it. I think I'm still sitting on the fence. I use this stuff, copper spray a gasket, high temperature sealant, and what that does, I mean, well, let's go back a few years. Years ago, when they were rebuilding engines, like in the Ford V8, meaning the flathead V8, and these old tractors, Fords and tractors, Continental engines, what the old mechanics would do is they would paint aluminum paint, like roof paint, aluminum roof coat onto the mating surfaces of the head and the block. And what that would do would be fill in all of the imperfections in the block and in the head, and then you put the gasket on there, and that would make it. It would seal it much better. There would be less weeping. It would be a lot less problems with that stuff. So later in time, they come up with different types of spray gasket, and that's what this is. This is a copper spray gasket. It's designed specifically for heads, mating heads to blocks, which is awesome, because I've used this in the past successfully on just about every engine that I've overhauled, with the exception of this one. Because when I bought the head gasket for the last one, it came with a piece of paper that said, do not do that. This gasket is meant to be put on dry. And, you know, it's like, but there's no pitting. There's none of that shit. I did not go over this thing with a I did not go over this thing with a wire wheel or anything like that, but I will be going over it with a razor to get any imperfections off of it. But I don't know, I may or may not use this just because I'm me, you know, and I do things sometimes differently. So anyways, I did the protrusion test on this thing, and basically what that is, and I think I put it away already, but basically what you do is you take a bolt with washers and you put it's a 1/2 inch bolt, and you put that in there, and I used a 3/4 inch washer for the head or the sleeves, and then I put a 1/2 inch washer on the bolt and was able to force this down. Now, I don't have the fancy protrusion gauge. Now, this thing's protrusion is supposed to be like 0.001 to 0.004. I think actually on this engine it's 0.001 to 0.003. So what I've done is you take a feeler gauge, and I'm pretty happy with 001, which is paper thin. It's 1/1000th of an inch. A thousandth of an inch. So what I did was I put that 1/1000th of an inch feeler gauge along there, and then I took my thumb and I ran it up against that. Hold on here. Okay, so what I did was, like I was saying, is I ran that feeler gauge up against there. Now there's a fancy little gauge that you can buy, and basically it's a needle or a gauge. It's got a little plunger point onto it, and you lay it flat on the block, and then you slide it up until it pops up here, and that will give you your protrusion in whatever you want, whether it's in hundredths or thousandths, and you know, that's all good. So I did all of these, and these are all in that 3/1000ths range, but this one here, all the way on the end here, this one here sets a little bit lower, but it is still within the 1/1000th of an inch tolerance. When I put my feeler gauge up there and I slid my finger across, I could not feel a lip. It just wasn't there. So I was like, well, shit, 1/1000th of an inch. Well, I look, it says it has to protrude 1/1000th to 3/1000ths of an inch. And these ones here are like 2.5, you know. So, of course, when I take the bolt off, and I took the bolt off, these have actually came up a little bit. I was rather surprised. But this one here, this one's a lot lower. And I don't know whether it's the sleeve or well, it can't be the sleeve. It's got to be the block. But, yeah, I'm not going to buy any shims. I'm just going to let it ride the way it is. Just because that's the way I am. I'm just going to let her go. They're all torqued down already, and everything's good to go. So my protrusions have been checked. If you don't like my methods too fucking bad, and you can go back to your armchair mechanic workshops and tell me how I suck. But that's just me. So that was done, and I'm pretty much ready to go ahead, get underneath here with my torque wrench, which I have right there on the ground, and torque those main bearings down to 150 foot-pounds.